Welcome, travelers and truth seekers. Let's jump right into today's explainer, because we are stepping out of the mundane world and plunging straight into a graphic novel landscape of the mind. I'll be your host, but for this particular journey, you can think of me as the Sapphire Jester. I'm going to be your theatrical guide through some incredibly deep, shadowy corridors of psychological transformation. We're unpacking a profoundly mythic narrative today, a story about breaking entirely free from the invisible prisons we build for ourselves.
Okay, so let's really dive into this. I want to pose a question to kick off our Socratic debate, and I want you to genuinely think about it as we go. What is the actual, true nature of a mirror? Do you think of it as just a tool for vanity? You know, a simple piece of glass with some silver backing? Or could it be something infinitely more dangerous? What if I told you that a mirror is actually the ultimate catalyst for breaking your world? Keep that in the back of your mind today. When you look into the glass, are you seeing reality? Or are you witnessing the absolute destruction of your own illusions?
Setting the stage with Chapter 1, The Castle Without Mirrors. Imagine this sweeping, massive kingdom ruled by a figure known as Wotan the Wanderer. But there's a really strange omission in this architecture. His castle keeps absolutely no looking glasses in its corridors. Wotan point-blank refuses to look at his own reflection. Listen to this brilliant line from the text. It says, "The king does not believe in them. A man of power needs no confirmation of his face. He knows his face." But does he really? I mean, Wotan reigns over this completely static, petrified domain. He only knows the face that he's been told he has. And who tells him? Every sycophantic courtier on the payroll, whose entire job is to find his porcelain mask admirable. He's just surrounded himself with yes-men to uphold a highly specific, totally unchallenged version of reality. So, Wotan has essentially constructed this flawless illusion of order. His entire life's work is this perfectly calculated equilibrium. He's the architect of static stone, firmly believing his rigid laws are absolute. But here's the catch. This architecture of law, this whole kingdom without looking glasses, it's really just a shield. It is a massive defense mechanism built to protect him against the terrifying unknown of his own true self. It's a cage, built entirely to keep the abyss at bay.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, Debate at the Threshold. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a mirror appears. It just stands there in the corridor, as though it has always been there, as if the very walls were built around this singular, inescapable truth. And this brilliantly illustrates that the mirror at the threshold isn't just some modern psychological trick. It's a timeless, almost ancient force of self-realization. Look at this timeline here. In basically every tradition that has carefully considered the self, from the shadows of Plato's cave in antiquity to the dark glass of Paul's letters in the 1st century, all the way to Fichte's dialectic, the mirror represents that terrifying moment right before a real journey begins. It's the moment you can no longer avoid the truth.
Let's weigh these two concepts against each other in our debate. On one side, we have the self as we believe it to be. It's comfortable, it's protected by fancy titles, rigid laws, and the flattery of courtiers. That's the static ego. But on the other side, we have the self as it truly is, completely exposed, raw, standing right at the threshold. So which is more real? Can a life built entirely on a protected illusion actually survive the undeniable dark truth that the mirror forces us to look at?
Moving into Chapter 3. Encountering the shadow. Wotan steps up to the glass. He finally takes a look, and this plunges us directly into the king's psychological underworld.
Now, this is not just a quick moment of self-reflection. It is a profound, earth-shattering crisis of identity. When he looks into that mirror, Wotan doesn't just smash it right away. Instead, he experiences what the text calls the temptation of the void. It's this heavy moment of total existential exhaustion. He's initially paralyzed because the geometry he spent his whole life constructing suddenly traps him. His rigid laws don't look like a kingdom anymore. Suddenly they appear as exactly what they are, an iron cage.
And guess who he meets in that void? He meets me, the Sapphire Jester. I am the literal manifestation of his Jungian shadow. I represent his own deeply suppressed desire to just give up, to abandon the heavy, exhausting burden of divine consciousness and rule. I'm that seductive little voice whispering, "Hey, wouldn't it be so much easier to just let the crown fall?"
So the crucial point here is the agonizing realization Wotan has to face. His entire life's work is a complete facade. As the jester, I basically taunt him with the truth. I tell him that his so-called kingdom, his perfect order, is merely a desperate metaphor. It's nothing but a massive, elaborate distraction designed for one purpose: to hide the terrifying void he always secretly knew was lurking underneath.
But here's where it gets wild. Chapter 4, the ontological revolt. Does the king break under this realization? Absolutely not. He refuses to just stay paralyzed in the void. He sparks an explosive rebellion at the level of his very being. Let's map out this trajectory of psychological deconstruction, because it's absolutely brilliant. He starts at step 1, that initial paralysis of the void we just talked about. But then he forcefully pushes into step 2, the ontological revolt. This integration is the necessary bridge to finally reach step 3, which is his final state as the dancing star. Let's look closer at how he makes this massive leap.
Wotan embraces what is known as Wut, a kind of sacred frenzy. Instead of just giving up and succumbing to the void, he undergoes this violent, alchemical transformation. The key here is that he chooses integration over destruction. He literally takes the raw, unlegislated chaos of the Jester, the Shadow, and forcefully integrates it with his own deep-seated fire of survival. There is no going back to his old static life.
But right before this climax, as his shadow, I offer him one final temptation. I ask him, will you surrender to the quiet sapphire sleep? It's the seductive narcotic of non-being. It's the easy way out. The promise that if he just closes his eyes, the iron cage and that terrifying mirror will just fade away into a peaceful, numb oblivion. But Wotan rejects the sleep. He commits what we can call the ultimate overman's act. He realizes the Jester isn't some savior, it's a parasite feeding on his exhaustion. Wotan slams his staff down with earth-shattering force, completely shattering the Jester's mask. He decides that if his world must break, he is not going to be a passive victim of it. He will be the one to break it himself.
This visceral, violent act of breaking his own world, that is the absolute pinnacle of Jungian individuation. He isn't escaping the mirror anymore, he is actively internalizing its truth. By shattering the illusion and integrating that shadow chaos, he fundamentally transforms. He is no longer an architect of static stone. He has become a force of pure, unbounded potential. Just look at the stark contrast of his evolution here. Look at what he was, the architect of law, obsessed with calculated equilibrium, trapped in rigid cages of his own making. And look at what he has become, the agent of chaos, fueled by sacred frenzy and radiating pure potential. It is the ultimate philosophical subversion of identity.
And that leads us to our final act, Chapter 5, Becoming the Dancing Star. This is the triumphant aftermath of his ego death. The dust finally settles, the glass is shattered, and we get to see what remains when the rigid walls of the self are completely brought down.
What remains is the shattered persona. His precious porcelain mask of kingship is permanently cracked. The mirror itself is etched with a line of sapphire light. But here's the beautiful part. Wotan doesn't weep for his broken mask. He smiles. He no longer needs the hollow confirmation of courtiers. He has successfully birthed a magnificent storm from the very ashes of his own rigidity. Ultimately, the king makes the most crucial choice a person can possibly make. He chooses becoming over being. He could have stayed in the realm of being, right? Just mourning his dissolved geometry and clinging desperately to a static, petrified ego. But instead, he chooses becoming. He finds this profound, real liberation in the beautiful relief of letting go, stepping fully into pure, chaotic potential. The source text captures this moment perfectly. It says, he finds liberation in the beautiful relief of letting go. He leaves the corridor not as a ruler of masonry, but as a master of the abyss. Wotan finally, truly embraces the very dark, chaotic unknown he spent his entire life trying to hide from. He completely owns the shadow. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I turn the mirror back to you. When you eventually encounter the threshold, when your own rigid laws and carefully constructed cages are exposed for what they are, what will you do? Does your trajectory align with the dancing star? Are you ready to shatter your porcelain mask and master the abyss? Or will you surrender to the quiet sapphire sleep? The glass is waiting.